Hey, Senator Merkley, what's on everybody's mind? Impeachment. From where you sit in the Senate, you have to wait for the House to vote on it. We assume that it will be passed by the Democratic majority. What do you expect to see in the Senate?
Well, I expect there to be a trial starting in the early weeks of January, probably about January 6th, best bet right now. But my concern is whether the Senate is going to rise to the task. And by that I mean that these are the moments that require us to really look to our responsibility to the Constitution and to our country and to set aside all partisanship.
So when I watch these hearings, Republican says it's exactly the same thing, Democrat says exactly the same thing. So when I'm guessing, when you mean rise up, you're hoping some people are going to cross the aisle. I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm hoping that each and every senator will say, as I hear this testimony, what would I do if the president was of the other party? Because if you can't answer that you do exactly the same thing, then you're failing the test of your oath of office. You need to be able to say, if the president, in this case, was a Democrat, and this evidence had been presented, here's how I'd vote. And for the Republicans, they need to be able to do the same thing. This really is a moment where our institution requires that we put our country before our party.
What we're hearing is the White House wants one type of trial, and Mitch McConnell wants a different type of trial. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, we've heard that the president has said he would like to have a long trial and bring in all kinds of folks to testify, pursue some of the conspiracy theses that he's put out in the past, and that in general, the leadership of the Senate has said they'd like to have a short trial. I'm not sure in reality that there's that much difference between them, because every single day that you're in a trial, if new evidence comes to light, it would affect the president. So I suspect the president on some level probably understands that he might be benefited by a shorter trial. To me, it's not short or long. It's like, is the evidence going to be responsibly presented and responsibly discussed? And if that only takes a week and a half, fine. But if the evidence requires 3 weeks, it should be 3 weeks. If it requires 5 weeks, it should be 5 weeks. We have, again, this responsibility that transcends politics.
I know you're not in the House, but there's a lot of talk about how some House Democrats may vote against the impeachment because they're in a swing district. What are the political realities there that they're having to deal with?
Well, I would hope that it would have nothing to do with being in a swing district, because this is a situation where you're supposed to look at the executive branch and then the check and balances provided by Congress. And the founders were actually very concerned about parties emerging. Most of them spoke about how they hoped there wouldn't be parties. They wanted people to each take their set of understandings and bring them to bear in a responsible fashion. And of course, we do have parties because the natural instinct is to work in partnership with folks who have a similar view. But there are moments like the impeachment inquiry in the House and a potential impeachment trial in the Senate where really we have to put all of that aside. So I would like to think that those individuals are trying to wait, as I've described, how they would vote, regardless of the party of the president. But of course, I'm not on the House side, and I don't know their thoughts.
All right, let's switch to more local things. On Monday, you have a summit. Tell me about that.
Yes, the summit is the business summit here in Oregon. It has been going on for, well, a decade and a half or so now. And it's over 1,000 members of the business community come together. Senator Wyden and I will be there doing a discussion about a series of issues. It is a moment where each year there's a lot of work that's done in advance to prepare to try to identify the large issues affecting our state. I'm sure there'll be issues discussed of housing, of water infrastructure, of transportation infrastructure, and green energy.
This is about the business. Do you think you'll be talking about tariffs at all?
Well, I'm sure there'll be thoughts expressed on trade. Certainly we're at a point right now where it's a rather chaotic trade structure, and we have almost every week we hear of some new plan to impose tariffs on China and for China to impose tariffs on us, and there's a lot of nervousness about just where those tariffs will hit. And of course we have the text just coming out now of the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
Do you think there'll be hard, solid things that come out of the summit, or is this more ideas?
Well, often there are kind of action plans that come from the summit that are pursued by the business community in the course of the year to come, areas that they feel need to be worked on. For example, right now I'm immersed in exploring the strategies to increase funding on housing programs. If you walk around Portland, you know what I mean, that we have a big challenge with having a community in which there is a decent home for every person in need. And it's such a contrast to when I was a child, and there were very few homeless people. So that is certainly a concern to the business community, and I'm sure there'll be discussion of what strategies are most effective. They'll bring their perspectives to bear. I'll bring my perspectives to bear, and think about what programs can I advocate for to be a good partner to our state.
Now, we see that in the Bay Area, some people are talking about having old cruise ships be places where people could live and go to as a possibility. People are trying to find radical ideas and try to think outside the box.
Well, people are, and you see here in Oregon a number of ideas being explored. You see the small house movement. You see kind of pop-up villages that are moved every few months with a strategy of having a safe, secure place for folks to be. Can you establish more shelter space, but create transportation links so people are connected to the downtown of whatever city is nearby? I do think that we need to look at all of these options and more. For example, single room occupancies. I had the chance to live in a single room occupancy when I was in New York City, and people would say, well, bathroom down the hall, isn't that a terrible way to live? And actually, it was a perfect way for me to live because I had a fellowship that paid $800 a month. And how can you afford to live in New York City on $800 a month? But by living in an SRO, it was clean, it was decent, it was safe, and it cost me $50 a week. I could afford to live there. And I didn't, much better to live in the SRO than live on the street. So I mean, we need to look at the full range of options.
Senator Merkley, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be with you.